Welcome to Writing the Wrong Way. This is a podcast for serious writers who want to develop their skills in artistry and stand out in a crowded industry by taking intelligent, creative risks. I'm your host, Jonathan Ball. I hold a PhD in literature. I'm the author of numerous books, and I take a very analytical approach to art making, emphasizing both efficiency and experimentation. So I'm here with Ryan Fitzpatrick, my co-creator of the 95 Books Reading Challenge, and we're here again to talk about the books we've read. I've read 55 books so far this year, so we're sitting in, May 6th as we're recording this?
Yeah.
May 6th. I can't say the word 6th properly, so I like to just say May 6th. Anyway, yeah. This is May 6th. I've read 55 books so far this year, so I'm, jumping ahead faster than most years usually. Where are you at, Ryan?
I'm currently scrambling to look at my number because I didn't write it down. I read 54, so I just read 54.
So we are right up there with we're pretty much even this year. Me and Ryan do a competition. Yeah. We have a competition of it, which is that whoever reads more books in a year has to buy the other sushi. Although the last few years we haven't been in the same city long enough to get sushi. But I'm hoping to make it to Toronto this fall.
Good.
So we'll have to tally up who owes who sushi at this point. But I've got a book out this fall, so in theory I should be in Toronto for that. I'm going to talk to Coach House on Monday or Tuesday. Actually, I was just emailing with them. You
can get Coach House to pay for the sushi.
I don't think that's the contest, but I've got to pay for the sushi. If I lost, if I won, then you pay for the sushi. If I lost, I can't hook Coach House for that. Is the accounting and CRA won't let me. It'll be like a tax nightmare. If I go to try to write it off, whatever. But anyway, so we're kind of even then with books. Ryan, the way that we did this last time, we kind of liked, so we thought we'd do it again. We'll each just talk about it a little bit about some of the books we liked best, or just thought were most interesting for whatever reason that we've read out of not all 55, but just a couple of them. And then we're going to focus. We both read the same book, which we're going to talk about in a bit more, length or detail. Which this time is Ryan picked Nikki Reimer's poetry book, "My Heart Is a Rose, Manhattan," which I was already planning to read anyway. So we both kind of just decided on that one. Although we've read, I'm sure, a couple other books in common by this point.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's just dive right into your kind of faves or just most interesting things you've seen of late. What's your reading looking like lately?
I kind of dropped off a little bit the last month, so it's been a little lighter than it was like the last time we recorded, but whatever. So I want to talk about a couple, but before I did that, I wanted to shout out Kayla Czaga's Dunk Tank, which is the most recent book I've read. And I don't want to go into it unless you want to go into it.
We could. I read that one too.
I think I don't have. Well, I posted on Twitter. Yeah, I posted on Twitter immediately after I read it that I think every other poet should read this book and just be embarrassed by their own writing, because this book is just on the level of the image and on the level of the line, it's just extremely well crafted. And I read it and I was fucking embarrassed by my own writing a little bit. And so get to it, other writers. Feel the embarrassment.
Yeah, and that book's called Dunk Tank. There's a great line in that, or part of that book, where she says, one of the later poems, which is this very long one, which is probably the highlight for me. I forget the name of it though, but it has one moment where she says, or she writes, "What's the rent like in my own poem? Do I get a discount for it being so goddamn haunted?" I just think that's this brilliant set of moves, from line to line.
Yeah,
I really like. This is something I've been thinking about.
That's every fucking line in this book. Every line in this book is that line.
I've been thinking about that way of moving line, from line to line, a lot, because I've been editing this poetry book of my own that's coming out this fall, and that's something I noticed a lot in. I mean, I've always noticed that in poems and like that ever since take creative writing classes, Dennis Cooley, and back in the day and everything. one of his big things was always, you should think about like going from this line to that line. Like, what's this? What do people expect, and then what do you give them? And almost like that joke structure, that we are often talking about. And I really like poets that do that effectively in a really kind of interesting and kind of twisty way. Like, I like those kind of twists. So I thought that book was really impressive in that way, for sure. What else did you like that you read, or wanted to talk more about?
So I spent a lot of time with this book by Saidiya Hartman called Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, Intimate Histories of Social Upheaval. And I know Saidiya Hartman as a central figure in Black Studies, and I had read one of her previous books called Scenes of Subjection, which is like just a straight-up academic book. It's like fucking brilliant. And so like I came to this one knowing it was coming out, and it was getting a lot of attention, specifically from like a lot of Black writers and artists in Toronto, and also like a lot of Black Studies folks in general. And so I picked it up thinking it was going to be an more academic thing, like this other book I had read of hers, and it's not. And so partly one of the reasons I want to gesture towards this book, like, other than the fact that it's like an excellent read, is the way that formally it works through a lot of like archival research, but uses the form of I would say the form of the novel, but it uses like a narrative form to get this archival research across. And when I started, I was so surprised that I tweeted out, like, kind of half jokingly, like, am I being tricked into reading a novel by Saidiya Hartman? And the Christina Sharp, who's a really notable Black Studies scholar, chastised me with single word no. Which she's right, because to say, is this just a novel? That sounds dismissive. But also, like, my thinking was, there's that moment in Karl Marx's Capital where one of his chapters switches from his like dialectic argument and like all these kind of numbers to like, the book turns for like 20 or 30 pages into a fucking Dickens novel. And to me, this book is just that.
Baudrillard does that in one of his books. In Fatal Strategies, there's a great moment where Baudrillard just starts throwing science fiction plots at you. It's like, what if, I forget the exact one, but this is brilliant, weird science fiction plot. And he just like throws it out. Deleuze and Guattari do it too with horror stories. Like, here's a horror story all of a sudden. And Freud, interestingly, used to, like, I always think of Freud because he was a big fan of mystery novels. And in many ways structured his theoretical books with cliffhangers. Yeah. Like, if you read Beyond the Pleasure Principle, it actually has cliffhangers, that book. Okay. That's interesting. I haven't seen it in modern stuff.
Well, I think this book is doing that. And the other book I'm going to mention, like, is doing, I think, a variation on it. But I thought I'd read what I think is the thesis of this Saidiya Hartman book. It's in an essay/narrative called An Atlas of the Wayward, which is about W.E.B. Du Bois and like this anthropological, sociological research that he was doing. And there's a point where Hartman writes, in a novel, he possessed the ability to transform a ruined girl who grew up in a brothel into a heroine. But achieving the same in a sociological study proved nearly impossible. Literature was better able to grapple with the role of chance in human action and to illuminate the possibility and the promise of the errant path. So I think that's the thesis statement for this 400-page book. It's this question about, like, what can't, like, a standard academic study do that literature can do better, that explains why she's decided to take this, like, different formal approach. And so, like, the other book I wanted to talk about is that I think is doing something similar, but maybe from the reverse direction, is Slash by Jeannette Armstrong, which is like super canonical, although canonical in that way where, like, if you're a grad student in CanLit, you've read it, but it's not like popular reading or anything. I think the book's out of print, but it's like mid '80s. It's a novel about this character Tommy Kalasket, or Slash as he's sometimes called in the book, and it's kind of like, I was going to say it's like a buildings roman, but like it's kind of from the beginning of his life to like middle age kind of. But it kind of like tracks him as he's like growing up in BC with, like, he's Okanagan, the character's Okanagan. But as he grows up, he becomes an activist. He gets involved with the American Indian movement. So it's like covering all this like historical ground at the same time it's telling the story of how he negotiates it. And the reason why it was interesting to read this like at the same time as this Saidiya Hartman is this is a book that presents itself as a novel, but it keeps putting this character Tommy in these situations where like he's kind of like just listening to people have arguments around him. So it's like almost like Brechtian in the way that like you as reader is put in the kind of position of listener, where Tommy is also the position of listener, and you have to kind of suss out what the argument of the historical moment was. So it's like it's doing theory in a different way through this kind of like through this mechanism of playing the argument out in front of you, which I thought was really interesting. I want to go back to both these books because I feel like I haven't done them justice in talking about them like this, but they're both really like excellent, and using form or using narrative form in like in a way that's not just about like entertainment. Like it's trying to figure out what are the possibilities of narrative form to do something else, to do something political.
It's interesting. Yeah, I've been really interested in that. That's the thing that's most interesting to me is, playing with narrative form in unusual and unique ways. Just kind of a weird side note. It popped in my head what I should read next time we do one of these things. It's my turn now to pick a book that we're going to like both read. What I'm going to pick? I was thinking as you kind of connected to some of the stuff you've been talking about. I think was looking the other day at this pile of books I've got, that sent to me, and the one I really want to read that I don't have a reason to read at the moment, but maybe this will be my reason to read it, is Ian Williams just put out a novel called Reproduction. Okay. And it looks, just kind of flipping through it, I really loved his poetry books that I've seen, which have been really kind of interesting in playing around formally. And this novel looks really interesting, and like it's doing a lot of interesting odd formal things, but I don't know because I haven't read it yet. But I'm going to pick that as like the book we're going to read. So this will be the teaser. So next time me and Ryan, talk in one of these podcasts, we'll be talking Ian Williams' Reproduction and seeing what we think of that.
But what? Let's do that next time. But what did you read this time around?
The two that really jump out at me.
I'm interrupting your water drinking. Yeah. So
the two that really, I read a bunch of different things, of course, but the two that really leaped out at me the most. One is this graphic novel by Emily Carroll, who did. If you don't know Emily Carroll, she's from a small town in Ontario, if I recall correctly, and she's an illustrator, but also writes and illustrates her own work, and she's really probably to me the most interesting horror writer in Canada right now, and she's been doing these brilliant, strange horror comic stories, and she has this brilliant book called Through the Woods, which is one of the most interesting books I've seen for a long time. It's a book of short stories, but they're these horror comics, and it's very kind of experimental and strange. Really fascinating work. She also, she just put out her first graphic novel, which is this really surreal story that almost on one level is a vampire novel about somebody who comes to this castle to murder this vampire, but another level is like a strange book about like on other levels it's about lesbian desire. On another level it's about it's just a surreal set of like narrative developments. The visual style is fascinating. They're going through this kind of labyrinthine castle maze, and she'll have like these 2-page spreads that just are bizarre, like Escher-like, you know, spreads with less of mathematical rigor, but with that kind of, you know, odd complexity and people moving from one space to another. It's a weird fairy tale in another level. There's one moment in the book where, again, this is a graphic novel, and this character is asked what happened to the people that came here before me. And she's brought to this room, and you know, there's like these doors that look like caskets, and so she opens the door, and then as you turn the page, she opens the door and you're turning the page as if you're opening a door as well, and then all of a sudden there's no images anymore. You're just presented with a 2-page text story, which is the story of what happened to this person. And then you turn the page and you're back in, you know, graphic novel land. Like, it's really a brilliant book construction in a lot of respects. And the story is, you know, fascinating and strange. And, you know, her artwork is really lush and interesting. And it has, again, it has a weird surreality to it on a certain level. In other ways, it kind of reminds me almost of, like, manga stylistically in some ways. And then as well, it is it's really minimalist in a weird, it's lush and also kind of oddly minimalist. Like, she only uses black, white, and red in the whole book. You know, it's really really fascinating work that she's doing. Anyway, her name's Emily Carroll, and the book, this new book of hers is called When I Arrived at the Castle. It's just strange. And her other book is called Through the Woods. Now, she's done a lot of other work, but those are the two kind of books she's written and illustrated herself. So I would really recommend both of them. But the one I read recently was, I don't know if it's out yet, but it's because the publisher sent it to me, but it's called When I Arrived at the Castle. I think it just came out. And then the other book that I read is by Coach House Books, which is, and it's a horror novel. This kind of weird experimental horror novel. It's very poetic and stylistically unusual. And it's called The Laws of the Skies. And it is by a French author. So it's being published in translation. I'm going to try to interview this guy, actually, because it's a fascinating, it's a little tiny, like 150-ish page book. And it is about these children. It's basically a slasher film in which almost all the victims are 6-year-old children. And it's like a bizarre, like perverse, disturbing, like weird book. It's brilliantly written and constructed, and it's just doing some really fascinating and strange things that, one, I don't see in a lot of novels. Like a lot of really interesting, odd things with the narrative voice. But two, in, you know, the horror genre, you certainly don't. My big complaint in horror, which is, you know, my favorite kind of genre in many ways, is horror. But my big complaint about the genre, of course, it's mostly garbage, like every other genre. But my biggest complaint is that you've got this narrative structure often where there's this kind of authorial, detached narrator telling you about these horrible things that have happened. And yet, you know, they're just, you know, telling you about it in a kind of plain, straightforward manner. I think that fundamentally, like, for a horror story to be interesting and to convey horror, it has to sort of break down on the narrative level in a certain way. Like, the way I like to explain it is, like, if it's so horrible what's happening, like, why is it so easy to talk about it? It should be hard to explain what's happening. And so I think this book has a really weird and interesting approach. And again, he's a French novelist, and so, or a French writer, and so this is the only book. He's got other books, but this is the only one that has been translated into English, is my understanding. And anyway, it's really interesting. And in France, they have a much different, like historically, the French have a more, like they kind of view horror as a more literary genre than we tend to view it in North America. And so I'm not sure how actually unusual this would be in French, the French context, but to look at it from as like a Canadian literature press, putting out a book like this is weirdly, fascinatingly unusual. So anyway, I was really interested in those two books in particular. And then, of course, the other big book I really liked was Nikki Reimer's book. Although I could shout out a couple other ones. The three poetry books I've read recently that I liked the most. One was Kayla, I don't know how to say her last name, Kayla Czaga. Kayla Czaga's Dunk Tank, which you already brought up. Natalee Caple's Love in the CTHULUCENE, which I really enjoyed that book a lot.
I haven't read that one yet. I'm hoping to.
Will Second Wind put it out, and it's I don't know if it's out yet. Again, I think it's just coming out now.
It's out. They have. Okay. I just have bought it. They have it at the Book City by my house.
Okay. Yeah. So it's out, and then
it exists.
It's really good, and I mean, I'd seen a version of it in draft, but it's much better than the draft I saw. Not that it was bad or anything, but you know how it is. Like it changes so much. She did a lot of work on that book, and then Nikki Reimer's. My Heart is a Rose Manhattan. So maybe you can ease us into talking about that book. You picked that book. So why'd you pick this book in the first place?
I'm not sure because I hadn't read it when I picked it. I think
I loved her Downverse.
Part of it is Nikki's a friend, and part of it is I liked her previous two books, Sick and Downverse. And so I made a big assumption oh, this book will also be good and will be worth talking about. And also when we were making the decision, Nikki was being really vocal on Twitter, in a lot of ways. I don't want to dwell on this, but I do want to turn to Twitter just to open.
I remember her saying, "I wish I had written a marketable book," and tweeting things around she's got to promote this book and realizing, oh shit, how hard is it to promote a poetry book? And then of course, never mind often people are conflicted about promoting poetry books, but never mind just the realities of the weird marketplace / lack of a marketplace that is poetry. Now when you're moving into this weird position, I don't know if that's what you're meaning to talk about, but I was very interested in her tweeting around that, I don't know, a few months ago, whenever it was, when she was doing this. I don't know if that's what you're referring to or not.
Well, that's what I'm referring to. It's not where I want us to start, though. I do want us to start with Twitter. I've got these two tweets pulled up that feel like places maybe to start discussing this book.
Which I think a lot of these poem titles were tweets originally, were they not? Because I know that the poem I've got in front of me here is it's called "I Feel Like I've Reached Peak Nikki Reimer." I'm certain that I saw that in a tweet.
It's possible. So a week and a bit ago, Kathy Park-Hong, who's a poet and academic in the States, tweeted out, and it has this has 14,000 likes and 230 retweets. So you can tell, and I think she was getting a lot of flack for this, but she tweeted out, "I fear that difficult poetry is dying because of the way the internet popularizes certain kinds of poetry over others." So I think this is maybe a bit melodramatic. I think dying is the height. Saying it's dying is the height of melodrama. Difficult is a difficult word to deal with. But I think she's gesturing at there's something going on where there's a middle that's where certain kinds of difficulty can be talked about and other kinds are kind of absent, and I haven't entirely figured it out, which is why I'm bringing it up to talk about this. The other tweet was posted yesterday by Natasha Ramutar, who's one of the Scarborough Lit 2.0 crew, along with Adrian DeLeon and Tea Mutjoni, who I'm hoping I pronounced her name right. And she was at Fold, the Festival of Literary Diversity, which just happened in Hamilton. And she tweets this quote from Vivek Sharaya, from a panel presumably, who says, "The self-depreciating writer. We've seen that. It's boring. So
deprecating or depreciating?
Depreciating.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Partly, I want to acknowledge this is this quote is out of context, and I'm sure Vivek Shraya is talking in terms of like probably a very diverse group where if you're self-depreciating, you're like lowering your own value as a writer. And to say that to a room full of writers of color is very different than to say it as a white writer. But I want to pull this out of context anyway, and I want to ask you if the self-depreciating writer, if that's something we've seen and it's boring, is Nikki Reimer's The Heart is a Rose Manhattan boring?
I thought it was a really fun book
like that's a really
in a weird way.
So
here's the thing that's interesting to me about that book fundamentally. So it's a book that in many respects is about her trying and failing to on a certain level to work through her grief around her brother's death. I'm sure there's other stuff going on in that book, but like I would say on a fundamental level, you've got that, at the core, that kind of traumatic experience in the background, and they kind of, like in many ways, like the inability to like get past this horrible thing, which I think on one hand she's engaging with this cultural idea that people have to somehow surmount their traumas, alongside the kind of culture, like just the personal, like the general difficulty of doing that, and what does it even mean to try to do that? When should that even be the goal of a person? I think there's all these like interesting things with grief bound up in that book, and at the same time, it's very funny, and she's and it's very much that kind of like self-deprecating. I like to do self-depreciating. That's an interesting way to kind of rejigger the idea. Oh, I thought it was like it was like a weird capitalistic pun on self-deprecating. I like self-depreciating.
We can use that. We can use my misreading of this tweet in an interesting way if you want.
But I think it almost does work better to like say self-depreciating, because it's like a self-deprecation that has this capitalistic, like now has lowered your value, like in this capitalistic system, particularly when now you're trying to sell a book or something. Her previous work, if you go to people listening, if they go to writingthewrongway.com, they'll find the show notes for this episode where I'll just link to these books Ryan's mentioned and stuff. But I'll also link to an essay I wrote, a sort of mini essay I wrote on Downverse, which is Nikki's previous book. I don't really know Nikki much. Like, I've met her a few times and I like her, but I don't like know her as well as you do. But I got so a few years ago I got Downverse assigned to me for review by Rhubarb magazine, and I thought it was one of the most interesting books I'd seen for a long time. And I wrote a pretty lengthy little kind of mini review of it, which I'll link to, like I say, at writingthewrongway.com. But anyway, one of the things I can't remember the review precisely. One of the things I remember thinking, I forget if I mentioned this in the review, but one of the things I was thinking when I was looking at that book was, it's interesting how much she's kind of engaging in the kind of market politics around poetry and around emotional commodification. Like, I like to say that one of the things that is difficult and interesting to think about with a poem is, like, historically poems are where you put your emotions in order to transform them into a commodity in the marketplace. But yet it's this weird commodity nobody wants and like that has no value, but it has all this prestige value. So it's a weird sort of way. I think Twitter and social media have kind of become poetic in that manner of, they're also these places that you, just like in a poem, you go to take your emotional world and commodify it into something that has a prestige and a social value. And I think there's a lot of actually positive, interesting things that come along with that. But there's also, just like with poetry, there's also like this weird, like strange, dark, negative space side of it. And I think that it's just a very interesting. I think it's so interesting how her work engages just so fully to me with like deep emotional issues like grief. These, what we often think of as superficial things, like what people are saying on social media, or the kind of like temporary engagement people have in a performativity, like performing their emotions in this public way, and like just what poetry historically is like.
Let me try to resolve this. So like, because I agree with you, this is like in some ways a book about grief.
I really love how like she manages to do those sorts of weird tensions. I like poetry that sets those strange tensions in motion.
But, like I do think saying out loud that this is a book of poetry about grief, like reduces what the book is doing. So I want to talk about it from a slightly different angle. That I hope resolves this kind of like tension that you're spotting between it's a book about grief, but also it's a book about like performance. I've got this note. I made a bunch of notes when I reread this on the weekend, and in my notes I have this phrase, the texture of slangy dismissal. Because as I was reading the book, the thing I was really struck by was not, hey, this is a book about how sad Nikki is. It's like, this is a book about like the texture of that, like the social texture of the language of that. To the point, there's a whole suite of poems that are like engage with Twitter on a material level by getting a website to like remix her tweets, and like all the poems are just like the texture of it, right? It's not the emotion of it, it's like the texture. So what I'm interested in this like idea that like she's not just engaging with grief, she's engaging with the social texture of the language of grief, and the way that it fits in these kind of like public spaces or public-private spaces of social media, is that like it starts to build at a certain point a real dialectic between caring and not caring, which is that like, so it's like it's about grief, but it's about grief. It's about grief talked through, like expressed through self-dismissal, or like that's the way isn't that the way the book opens?
I'm not. You have to glance at the book there. I'm looking at the section "Letters to the Ethernet," which is what I think of when where everyone she's got a sequence of poems. Each of them is titled like "Dear Facebook," "Dear Twitter," "Dear LinkedIn," "Dear Craigslist," and it goes on like this: "Dear Tumblr," "Dear Instagram," and then the last one is called "I guess it's time to sign up for Netflix." And they're really interesting poems in a lot of ways. But one of the things that's really on a simple level interesting to me is how they are apostrophes, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this traditional poetic technique of writing to a absent entity, often an abstract entity, and I think her work is really interesting insofar as it has an engagement with like a poetic tradition and like kind of conventional techniques in that way. But then materially, she's doing some very unconventional things, that have kind of become more conventional, like remixing text through the internet and so on. But and then also having this, this interesting tension that you talk about between this odd performativity and this, kind of taking like wanting to take seriously, but also trying to not take seriously like one's own emotions. It's really. I just want to read a poem, which I think is the one that that to me is the most interesting poem. I don't know how to say the one word in it but it's like looks like. But anyway, it's that poem I mentioned before. I feel like I've reached peak Nikki Reimer, so I'm just going to read this poem because I just want to give people like an example of what you're talking about.
What page is that?
It's on page 85. Or maybe I'll let you read it. Can you read it? I feel like I've reached peak Nikki Reimer on page 85. Oh, sure. Read that poem. Let's give the Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Well, and this is where the book starts to get sincere at the end, right?
Yeah, but it's got some very funny stuff and strange. Like the ending of this poem is hilarious and odd.
Okay, let me read it. I will read it. I feel like I've reached peak Nikki Reimer. Nothing matters. They're shooting people in the streets every day. This headache is my life now. I'll go blind before I turn off my Facebook. Look, I've reached mid-career, middle-aged, middle income, middle brow. This ego fatigue comes with the territory. You can tell I'm the poem speaker because I can't stop swallowing the line endings. I'm recording my poop on the Bristol scale and sending my data to a woman in Edmonton. In this manner, I will seek to live forever, my poetry inscribed like so much fecal coliform in the Glenmore Reservoir. People might think the anxiety can be turned on and off like a faucet, but the truth is it's hardwired into the mainframe of my body, every cell vibrating at a pitch likely to induce paralysis in certain flat-faced dogs. It's a prenatal fight or flight response. You don't choose the skunk's life. I dreamt you on a houseboat, but I don't want you to think it means anything. The skunk's life chooses you. We're all material until we aren't. Should the plane be making that sound? Analytics or didn't happen. Fitbit reports or didn't happen. Cell phone logs or didn't happen. More migraines, more flashbulbs, more protein, more fleshlights.
See, I think that poem's hilarious, but it also is probably the most sincere and darkest poem in the book on another level. Like it's a very interesting, or maybe a trigger warning is, but it, it's. I like poets who can take those different strains, those different tensions, and hold them like against one another and not resolve anything.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know whether that makes it quote unquote difficult poetry or not, but certainly it's, it's not like Instagram poetry, like it's got it doesn't have that little tying it up.
I think that's why I brought up that Kathy Park Hong tweet, is because like I think one of the things that was getting worked out very badly by people who were like getting a little defensive or knee jerky about what she had written was this tension that's built into that word difficulty. It's like, by difficult, do you mean like emotionally difficult, or do you mean like difficult to understand?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this book is doing both of those things at once, in that it is emotionally difficult. And one of the reasons why it's sometimes difficult to understand or difficult to negotiate on like a syntactic or like a semantic level is because it's also difficult emotionally.
I think in some ways, though,
on the writer's side.
But don't you think that, like, I agree with you, but I think that what people don't often understand about quote unquote difficult writing is that it actually isn't that difficult. Like, for example, like I've got a lot of anxiety issues, and every time she talks about anxiety, I know exactly what she's talking about. But it is kind of like another language that maybe like the average person doesn't understand or something. But like the jokes, like the jokes about it, or even like the fractured and fragmented discussions around like it. Like I think there's a lot of ways in which quote unquote difficult writing, or whatever that means, it just often is just a different type of speaking, and it is only really for, and like its audience is different. I think like the audience is just not as large in a certain sense in terms of like who you're speaking to. Like this is a book that I think could probably make a lot more sense to somebody who had like a close family member die, just recently, for example, or who had like I don't know, I don't want to like, who had like some like obsessiveness and hatred of social media, like, you know what I mean? Like if you had those like weird tensions where you kind of on one hand feel like you should feel this way, but then feel this other way, and then at times though, feel a third way, and are kind of upset at the tension. Like I think there's this compulsion in the society or in the culture to feel like you should feel a certain way, and you should express your feelings a certain way. And I think like what she is getting at a lot of times in these poems, like, is that idea. She's even got a poem where she, I forget the exact name of it, I'm trying to find, here, a poem called Ask Yourself, What Does the Culture Want? Is on 67. It's like, ask yourself, what can I do for the culture? Ask yourself, what does the culture need? Ask yourself, what does the culture know? Like, it just goes on like this. And it's really interesting because on one hand, it's like she often will engage in this kind of marketing language.
Yeah.
And I think like there's this weird compulsion in society now to market yourself, even if you're not. There's no reason to. You know what I mean? Like you have that weird rise of like personal branding and things like this, and like on one level, like that stuff kind of makes sense for a person who like, I don't know, like has a business connected to their image or whatever, but it doesn't make sense for a person who doesn't, but they're still doing it. You know, and I think like it's so interesting how saturated we are with marketing and advertising, and have just accepted like various levels of it in our daily lives that we never would have accepted before. Like I remember you and I are both old enough to remember like the 90s and being in high school, and like it's like, you know, all the it wasn't cool to wear like a t-shirt with a logo. It wasn't cool to like, you know, like a band that was on the radio. You know what I mean? Like it just is very like the idea of selling out was like, it was, you know, bad to sell out. Now like now it's like rappers made selling out cool, and like the whole culture shifted like with them in that sort of interesting way. And you know, I think this is such a weird set of pendulum swings that I've seen, at least since I just look at like high school when I was in high school, and then high school when my like daughters in high school, and I think like how different it is in so many ways. One of the really simple ways is like now it's like you're expected to like have a presence in the culture, no matter who you are, and you're almost like demonized for not like doing it. It's really interesting and odd. I don't know, but I think it's kind of all bound up in the background of what she's trying to get at with, you know, some of this. Like I think there's like a distrust of your own emotions that I think she starts to express, and I think comes along with. I think it's just part of the culture today. Like you have that sort of weird expectation to be performing your emotions all the time, which I don't understand. Like I'm like a little old school in the way. Like I don't understand having an emotion online, and like it doesn't make sense to me. I just am not that. I just have never understood like why a person would want to express their emotions like in that way. But that's just like, I don't know what that is. Maybe it's growing up in a small town in the 90s, or who knows what it was. But like, it's just like it's very, I think there's like this weird slipperiness now where it's like there's this distrust of one's own emotions because you're so often asked to engage with your own emotions.
You can't always tell where is this emotion coming from.
And I think, you know, or
what is causing me, like it's not the,
or am I getting a feedback that's looping in some way?
It's the way you express it publicly. There's some kind of like
there's conventions, right? Like it's just a Denver type of social convention, but they're very new and they're very like recent. They change a lot fast. It's very interesting. Like something that would be, again, I think of like something that is acceptable now versus like acceptable when I was younger. Not that I'm not even 40 yet, but like, you know, I think how fast it's just gone 180. And like how fast it just switches and changes. And I think there's just a way in which I know, like I'll sometimes catch myself wondering, like, am I experiencing a real emotion here, or is this like feedback from from like an emotion? Almost in like if you have like if you're playing like guitar and you're too close to the microphone or something, like you get this feedback, you know. I always like wonder like how much of my emotions like are just this feedback, where it's just I'm too close to something. If I stood over there, I wouldn't feel this way. And there's this weird, like, how much of it is just that cultural, like something it's just bleeding into you from other people. I know mirror neurons work that way, right? Like, and there's this kind of interesting level at which I think she's engaged with a lot of these things in a way that I see other writers engaging in, but they're not as funny, and they're not doing it as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they don't have, like, I think I like comedy in this kind of poetry. Kayla's book does it well as also. Czaga's book. I'm saying her first name because I can't remember how to pronounce her last name. I feel bad saying that, but like I don't want to say her name wrong, so I just would rather not say it. But I feel bad saying Kayla because I don't know her. You know what I mean? Like, anyway.
Yeah.
But anyhow, it's it also does that that thing where it can be very sincere but also very funny, and that tension I think is really useful and interesting because of course, I don't know, like to me, like that's I think like if you take the quote unquote difficulty away, like it is a normal thing people do. Like, things are going horribly and they just start making jokes about it. Like have you like I read Nikki's Reimer's book and I think of all those times in my life where it's like something was so horrible that I just thought it was funny. Like I started to detach from my own life and just laugh at my own predicament the way that I would laugh at somebody on TV because it was so unreal. Like this ridiculous thing that was happening. It's like it obviously it can't, like it's so horrible that it's like it's as if it's happening to somebody else, and you can kind of like find it amusing in a weird way. I don't know if you've ever like had that reaction, but I'll sometimes have that weird reaction where it's like something's going so wrong that I just am like, I kind of almost imagine myself as an outsider and thinking how funny it would be if it wasn't happening to me. Like if I was on TV, how funny it would be, because just the ridiculous, like that ridiculously terrible. Anyway, I just find her, I think on that level, like her stuff's really quote unquote accessible and like easy to understand, if you know what I mean.
Okay, so the verdict is Nikki Reimer's book, not boring.
Not boring. Yeah, it's the least. I don't understand when people say like a book like is boring because of its subject matter. I mean, anything is boring if it's poorly constructed. But it's not boring if it's well constructed. Like subject matter has no bearing to me on whether something's interesting or not. Don't you find like that's a general like you can pick up a thriller and it's like, I mean, it could be about anything. It's good or not good. It's thrilling or not thrilling, like based on effects and techniques.
Yeah,
it's nothing to do with like what the book's about or the story's about. That's why I don't care. Other than Game of Thrones, which I'm stringently avoiding hearing anything about, which is like the only show that I watch because not that it's the best show or anything, but it's just like I can only watch like 2 shows. So I picked Game of Thrones and BoJack Horseman. Those are the 2 shows that I watch. You heard
on last night's episode someone died, right?
I've been trying not to hear that. Yes, exactly. But
that's like you probably say that about any episode of Game of Thrones.
You can say that about every minute of Game of Thrones. But
someone has just died.
Someone has just died. Yeah. But anyway, my point is simply
say that. I was about to make the joke. You could say that about Nikki Reimer's book, but that seems like in really bad taste, so I won't make that joke.
But it is a book that like has I just think like it's another example of these. I mean, I don't know what the reactions to the book have been. Like, has anybody reviewed it or talked about it? In any detail? I haven't been looking at, other than me though.
I don't think it's gotten a lot of attention. But also,
I mean, no poetry book does. But
yeah.
But I just when people complain about books like it.
Yeah,
I'm often they'll say things like, "Oh, well, it's too hard to understand. It's too inaccessible. It's too boring." And I've never understood that like point of view because I find like, well, often when people are saying that about the book, it's because it's unusual, which makes it by definition interesting. Like to me, like an unusual thing is not boring.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
No, I agree with you.
Do you know what I mean? Like, even if you don't like it, or think it sucks or something, it's not boring.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, this is us saying, please go read Nikki Reimer's book.
Yeah, it's one of the top 3 books I read of poetry for sure in the last year. And I've read 55. I've read over 20 poetry books, and it's definitely in the top 3 of those. If not,
so read it and then go tweet at Nikki Reimer.
That her book is not boring.
That her book is good.
It is.
Don't
good.
Be a jerk.
Dude, here's another thing. Maybe we'll end up with this, but
also I know Nikki is listening to this probably. So hi, Nikki.
Well, hello, Nikki. I haven't seen Nikki for a while, but I've only met her a few times, but she's really nice every time I see her. And yeah, I like Nikki because she talks highly of her dad, and I like people who like have good relationships with their dads, because I'm always like, I don't know, because I've got like a daughter who's like 19 now, and I'm always like, anytime like I see like a woman discussing like her dad in a positive way, I'm like, hey, like, how could I be a better dad? I like doing research.
Give me some tips.
It's like, hey, this girl likes her dad. I wonder what he's like. What is he doing? You know, it's very strange, you know. But anyway, I'm like always in the background, like trolling around for like, oh, what's a thing good dads do? You know, I'll just add that to my list of things I should do, you know, if I can. You know, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's a weird way to look at social media, I guess. But anyway, I'm, you know, what's Nikki's social media handle? We should tell people that. I'll link to it, I guess, at writingthewrongway.com. I'll find it and link to it.
No, just give me 1 second. Just at Nikki Reimer.
Okay. So at Nikki,
on Twitter,
which is NIKKI REIMER on the Twitters. Go tell Nikki that you are reading or you're going to read her book. Do read it. The other book, she has 2 other books, as I say, they're both good, but Downverse is the one I would recommend, other than this one. Just because it's... which again, I wrote you know at length about that book, and so you can read that, and that's why I would say to read the book. I'm not going to go into like a bunch of details here, but I just find her stuff is interesting. It's very funny. It's got a lot of like engagement with really current cultural debates, but also. Is very personal and very emotionally accessible in kind of more traditional ways. And she has like a traditional, like, for all the surface oddness of the poems, like there's a real like conventional traditional engagement with like the history of poetry. Like the title itself, "My Heart is a Rose, Manhattan," and all the playing on Gertrude Stein's "A Rose is a Rose is a Rose." It's a rose. I think she does it 4 times. I think like there's all these really clear connections. It makes me think a little bit of how Sina Queiroz has recently been connects a lot of her work to Woolf and to how did I blank on one of the most famous poets in history, Brian? I just blanked on the name. One of the most famous female poets in history.
Oh, Sylvia Plath.
Sylvia Plath.
Yeah.
Sylvia Plath and Virginia Woolf are all in the background of Queiroz all the time, and I think anyway, we haven't really gone into too much, but Reimer's book really interestingly engages with a lot of that same with Stein and a lot of the same kind of poetic tradition there. That's true. Like, it reminded me of there's that poem in Susan Holbrook's "Joy is So Exhausting." That's like a collaborative poem with Nicole Markovich. Yeah,
and
that's
like,
when we put in Why Poetry Sucks.
They're doing this kind of like like these Steinian weirdo sentences, but each poem like is just like they're replacing words and translating it that way. And there are poems in this book that do that. So I think like on top of Stein, I think there's some like that Nikki's working like in dialogue formally with poets like Nicole and Susan as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great book. Definitely worth reading. Well, Ryan, any last words about your reading? Or about Reimer's
I've got another book I'd like to talk about at length. No, just kidding. Just kidding. These people don't want to listen to us talk anymore. These people have already...
Did they ever?
Shout out to all three of our listeners, i.e. the three people that told me that listened to the last one. That would be...
more than three people. I've got the stats somewhere. I'd have to look them up, but...
Well, I believe that three people listened to it because they were able to like tell me what happened on the episode when I gave them the quiz that I carry around. You say you listened to it, but did you?
It is a good... I know how many people have had a machine play it. But whether they listened to it or not, I'm not sure.
Okay.
It could have been they said it, they had like the thing playing, while they went to another room. They got bored and walked away or tuned it out. So next time we'll talk about Ian Williams' novel Reproduction. So get a hold of that somehow, Ryan.
I'll see if they have it at the Book City by my house.
Give it a shot.
Or
email the publisher and say you're going to talk about it on this podcast, and maybe they'll send you one. You could always try that, see if it works. I'm curious, see how much flex I have in the publishing industry. You never know.
They'll send you one, and then they'll go. Ryan Fitz who?
Yeah, Ryan Fitz who? Well, I just had my computer is shutting down for no apparent reason right now, so I'm gonna.
That sounds like
end the call. Talk to you later, Ryan.